welcome everyone to Be Wise, the Butterfly Effect. This is probably the most special Be Wise webinar that we're having for many reasons. It's special because of the allowance of everything and anything that anyone wants to share in this space, because of the speakers that we have with us tonight that I will allow to introduce themselves. I'll introduce each person by name and then allow space for each person to introduce themselves. But explaining what Be Wise is about and talking about our poll is what I'm going to do next. So Be Wise stands for be well, be informed, be safe, and be empowered. And although this is something that was named years ago and finally utilized in the right way this year for the webinars, I can't say that it's ever been so true as it is in this moment with this webinar, because all of those apply. When it comes to the polling piece, you'll see that there's an active poll available for you to fill in. I'd invite you to fill that in as we go along. At any point you feel okay doing it. It's something meant to be as candid as possible. It is anonymous. If you have information that you would like to share or answer in the poll, but you don't see that there's an answer that meets your needs, please put that into either a direct chat note to me, or you can send it out to everybody. So each question has that kind of direction. If you have another answer that you would like to submit, but it's not captured, just throw it into chat. Any questions that you have, any comments that you have, please feel free to put them into the Q&A or chat. Questions specifically the Q&A, comments specifically the chat. And we will strive to put everything that comes in there out there. The guideline that I'm laying down for this webinar is that we are conscious of a basis of respect and love. Anger does not negate love. It is an emotion that once we get through it, we understand that the basis of it is hurt, and we can express that in this space. I just ask for respect for everyone as we do so, because anger is a real part of our response to what's happening now. So I'll introduce everyone by name and then ask each person to then introduce themselves, what you're passionate about, and what you're bringing to the table today. So we have Masaba Mwambu, who is our IT Technical Director for True to Soul and also for Symmetrica. We have Trevor Ledsky, retired superintendent with the TDSB. We have Marika Pinkney, who is an actor, writer, producer, and also business development consultant. We have Paul Young, who is a storyteller and author. We have Morgan O. Smith, who is a spiritual life coach, who is the founder of Eunergy Meditation. He's also a youth outreach worker, and he is a person that also is a mystic that looks outside of the scope of what it is that we deal with on a more material, tangible level here. So we're looking at this on all levels, people. We also have one more person that will be joining us, Nathabo Nkube. She will be making her way into this space, and she is a life coach and an inspirational TEDx speaker, and someone that also looks at life in many levels, including the spiritual. So let's begin with Masaba. If you'd share a bit about yourself and what brought you into the space today to speak on this topic.
Thank you for the introduction, Keda. Currently, I work in the technology and the broadcast area that I have done for the past 20 plus years. I've had a lot of experience. Sorry about that.
Okay.
My life, growing up in Uganda, and there were a lot of challenges and experiences that I endured that have made me what I am today. And whether they were bad or good, I think I still like the way I am today. So that's all good. So I am passionate about a lot of things, and technology and helping people.
Sweet. Thank you. Thank you, Masaba. And for transparency, Masaba is also, we're partners. He's my husband. And I feel very blessed to have such a wonderful partner, not only for his technological savvy, which is awesome to have, but also because he is a tremendous human being. So thank you, Masaba. And Trevor Letsky.
Thank you, Kata. I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. And growing up in South Africa during apartheid, I experienced many times feeling unsafe, feeling that I did not belong, simply based on skin color. And while I've been an immigrant and a settler on this land for the past 52 years, it's become increasingly aware to me that while apartheid policies were based on the Indian Act of 1876, and that apartheid policy ended in 1994, the Indian Act, with all of its amendments, continues to subjugate First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people in this land. And as we were talking before the broadcast began, there are a lot of crossovers to what is happening currently, not only in America, but in Canada in terms of racism. And I think this is an opportunity for us at this time, and I know we'll get into this, but I think it is an opportunity for all of us to begin to put our collective minds and hearts together to move forward in a good way.
Thank you. Thank you, Trevor. And Marika, thank me.
Hi.
Hi.
So as Kata mentioned, I am an actor and I am also a business development consultant. I think especially most interestingly for this conversation, my history with business development was in industry disrupting startups. And so I was introducing products that initiated positive social change and got to experience what it was firsthand to introduce something different to a vast like variety of people. Most prominently, my years were spent as the business development manager at a company called Flow. And we were changing the norm, and the company still is changing the norm from plastic water bottles to something a lot more environmentally responsible. And watching people freak out about changing from plastic to a cardboard container was just very fascinating. And so from there, I got to move on to do work as the director of business development at a company called Buns that is still alive and well in Toronto and encourages sharing economy, again, reducing waste and working with communities internationally to embrace that. So I've had a really exciting career that way in terms of getting to see how people react to change and learning that really at the heart of it, they just want to feel safe doing it. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marika. And Paul Young.
Hey.
Hi.
Good to be with you. Honored to be with you. So let's see. I am a husband of one, a father of 6, and so far we have 12 grandbabies who are 12 years old and under. And 9 of them are within 15 minutes. And it's been kind of a real pain not to be able to hug them, except 3 of them just moved in with us because their mom is an ER nurse. And so she has been segregated from her own children, and there's twin 2.5-year-olds and a 4-year-old. So I'm exhausted, but it's great. And so she has gone back to their house. Our son Nicholas and the 3 babies have come to stay with us. So that's part of this COVID experience. Her mom's their mom's an ER nurse, and so she's having to deal with patients that have been infected. We have a son who's a Portland police officer, and which adds a real interesting dynamic to this whole time. He is the father of 4, including a child that they adopted, who we found out about had been basically thrown away because she was the result of an incest relationship between her grandfather and her mom was 15 at the time, and so I think I just got feedback. Oh no, so I'm okay. So and she is a child of color, which is wonderful to me, because one of the things you would not anticipate is that I was a year old when we moved into the highlands of New Guinea, and I grew up in a tribal culture. That's my background in my world. In fact, I didn't know until I was sent away to boarding school at 6 that I was white, and it was a huge disappointment. And so then coming back to Canada, because I was born in Canada, but coming back to Canada before I started high school, it was an absolute culture shock. And you know, and I'm supposed to fit in because I kind of look like I'm supposed to fit in, and I just had a really massive difficulty with cultural adjustment. But I think one of the great gifts for third culture kids that grow up in a different culture than their passport culture, is that they have a capacity, if they can get past their damage, they have a capacity to see things from outside the box. And you know, and it took me till I was 50 years old to become a healthy human being. It was the year I turned 50, and I remember it and going like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually a healthy person. I don't have any secrets, and I don't have any addictions, and I'm the same person in every situation. And I finally become a child, and it was after that I wrote a story for my kids, because Kim, my wife, had asked me one day, you know, would you write something as a gift for our children that would put in one place how you think? And I wrote The Shack. And I made 15 copies at Office Depot that did everything I ever wanted that book to do. I had no intention of becoming a published author. So being a published author is not an identity for me whatsoever. Being a father and a grandfather and a son and a brother and human being would be my primary focus of identity. But I'm thrilled to be with you all.
Thank you, Paul. And Morgan O. Smith.
Ever since I was, when I was a kid, I grew up in the area where I was exposed to a lot of racism. I didn't know what it was at the time, but of course, as I got older, I started to understand what was going on the whole time. So as much as I've done a lot of inner work to try to heal from that type of stuff, it's always something that when it does come up in conversation, or if it shows up in the media, of course, it's something that always, it draws me to the topic because of my personal experiences. But I feel that we can all heal if we do the actual work, and there's work that can be done internally to help us heal from that type of stuff, whether you're the victim or if you're the perpetrator. And we can all move forward if you're willing to do the work. I know that's not something that everybody would do because it's not easy, but it is possible. So my job is to see how many people I can to pass that information along so that they can do the actual inner healing. Because once you do the inner healing, not only do you get to heal, but you also get to discover your hidden potential. A lot of our hidden potential are covered just from trauma alone. So that alone can allow us to discover our true potential so that we can all reach it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Morgan. And welcome, Thabo.
Thank you, Keda. I finally made it in.
Welcome. Welcome.
Fashionable late, thank you.
Yeah. That's your entrance. Okay.
It's a Zimbabwe thing, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. Hi, Paul.
Hi, so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So if you'd share what you're passionate about, what you bring to this table, why you're here.
Right. Well, my life, I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and until the age of 14, my mother passed away. And it was the death of my mother that gave birth to my voice. And when my mother passed away, my mother promised her to become a medical doctor. And as destiny, grace would have it, moved to Canada, where I found myself living in community housing, subjected to poverty, went through so many different challenges, leading me to fulfilling the promise I'd made to my mother, but also my lifelong dream of becoming a medical doctor. Now, the journey itself led me to meeting Oprah Winfrey in 2011, and that in itself changed the trajectory of my life. That's when I would say I came to recognize the voice in me, the story in me, and what my true calling is, which is to use my voice and my story to inspire and to empower the girl child and women. And upon graduating from medical school, I received an opportunity to share my story on the TEDx platform. And since that opportunity, I've been traveling the world using my voice and my story to raise consciousness for such a time as this. I also had the privilege of sharing the stage with Reverend Michael Beckwith and Lisa Nichols back in 2017 in South Africa. And I would say for me, that was a big whisper that I'm on the right direction. And since then, I've been doing a lot of work centered on working with vulnerable communities, the girl, child, and women, as I mentioned. I'm really passionate about helping other people to recognize their true potential, helping other people to turn their pain into something that is bigger than themselves, which is their purpose. I'm here to use my voice to inspire humanity. That's what I'm here to do. And I was listening to everybody also making a reference to their encounters with racism. For me, that first happened when I arrived in Canada back in 2006. I remember arriving in my English class, and one of my English teachers said to me, "How come you can speak English?" And I say, because I'm from Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe has a British system, so we're taught each and every class in English. And she found that so hard to believe. And every assignment that I had to submit to her, she would give me 50s, whereas in other classes I was doing so well. And I knew that she was marking me that way because I had an accent, for starters, but number two, because I was from Zimbabwe. And that was my first encounter of racism. And I think for me, it molded me, and it made me work harder because I knew that I was different from everybody else. And I knew that there were people that I was going to encounter along my journey were going to treat me differently and perceive me in a different light simply because I was a Black child. But getting here, I'm thankful for each and every experience because I wouldn't be the strong woman that I am if I hadn't gone through that. So yeah, that's what I have to share for now.
Thank you so much, Nakabo.
Yeah.
I thank you all for being here today, and thank you for what you just shared. All so poignant, and I have this feeling, I don't know for sure, I might drop a tear or two. I'm not sure. I felt it coming up as each person spoke. So I'm very grateful for the energy you're bringing, because I feel that's what I'm responding to. And the people who have started filling in the polls, it's looking great. Please continue to do that. The information there is important. I mean, we're here to do, a lot more than talk. Talk is very important. Expressing is very important. But with that, what's exceptionally important is for us to move from this space with something tangible. Like we feel that this time we spent here can carry on and bridge into real life. That's what's most important to me. I'll share a little bit about myself to add to what everyone has contributed. I think approximately 5 years ago now, I identified as an adult survivor of sexual and physical trauma. Now, the reason that I did that was not to sensationalize anything, not to make anything about the traumatic incidents themselves, but it was a very personal journey for me. I'm talking about true to soul, I'm talking about trauma recovery. And yet I'd spent in excess of 40 something years hiding a lot of those secrets. So I couldn't still carry on with my business and what I want to do in the world. And like Paul spoke about, have all these secrets. And so that's what I did. In addition to sexual and physical trauma, what's not often talked about is racial trauma, which is the impetus for this forum today. Now, I grew up for a good portion of my life in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, out in the prairies, Paul. And so that's a place that at that time, at least, was a stronghold for KKK, Ku Klux Klan. So yes, a lot of my experiences did involve a lot of racial trauma, a lot of conflict, and a lot of life lessons that I can now look back and draw information from, fortitude from. I have a very intimate knowledge and experience, as we all do, of what that is, what it looks like, what it feels like. And what I've drawn from that, the gold nuggets that I've drawn from that is that nothing short of any of the traumas that I just mentioned can take me down. Nothing. My resiliency is top notch because I'm still here. And so that's the way I look at this that's happening. It breaks my heart. What has drawn us here? It does. With that being said, all of us that still sit here, what are we doing about it? So we're not going to just talk tonight. We're going to talk a lot, but we're going to draw something out of this. If you're here with the intention of contributing, please do so. Do it through the Q&A, through questions. If you're looking for ways to contribute, ask. It's anonymous. What is there to lose? If you have ideas that you think, well, that's way too out there, I can possibly put that out there. It's anonymous. What do you have to lose? Put it in the chat. Throw your stuff in here. We'll keep it. We'll use it. We'll create another space like this. It's a safe space to express. If you want to just scream, if you just want to put something down that you're usually afraid to say, throw it in this space. As long as it is not denigrating anyone, because I'm not into that, and this space is not for that, then put it down. Get it out. Because half the time, the reason why we're not moving forward is because we're obstructed by the emotions that we haven't let out. So that's why this space is about expression, it's about inspiration, and it's about action. Having said that, what I'd like to do is start with Marika. Okay. So you shared about disruption. Mm-hmm. And as much as this incident, and I don't like to refer to it as an incident, George Floyd's death, tragic death, has disrupted our lives as COVID-19 has, but in an entirely different way. We're shell-shocked. And what I would like to know, the question I have for you, is that process that you went through, disrupting an entire business. I'm wondering, how did you even begin that process of disruption? Because that's what actually needs to happen right now. People are trying to figure out, well, you know, we have the police, we have these systems that seem to just not see us as a diaspora, or does not see the need for equity across the board. Across the board, there need to be changes institutionally. How do you approach that?
Yeah,
big question, Marika.
It is a really big question. I think in order to actually answer it, I'm just going to make it really simple. And when I started at Flow, I was on a team of people who were just introducing the product to different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started out with a backpack at about 9:30 in the morning that was filled with 24 500 milliliter water bottles.
Hmm.
So I jokingly referred to it as my biblical quest,
Mm.
because I had water on my back and I had different art areas of the city targeted, and I would just walk in. And uh, after doing it for about 2 weeks, the way I would introduce it to people was I would say, "Hey, I've got a gift for you. Hey, I'm here with a gift." I stopped trying to sell people something because I had this product that I could offer as it was marketing collateral. I could leave it there behind, and at first people were pretty resistant to it. They didn't trust a product that they couldn't see because they were used to seeing water in the clear package.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I usually oftentimes I was able to get like a sale immediately because I was offering some really great financial benefit, but
Mm-hmm.
those sales never really amounted to anything afterwards. The ones that stuck were when I would visit the store with the backpack. Sometimes I'd be walking to a location from Liberty Village. Like I like would just walk down King Street to the bridge. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Toronto, but
Yes, that's 14 Division. I'm very familiar.
a
Yes.
long walk. And it really just took me going in and delivering a consistent message with a smile on my face
Mm-hmm.
and not putting pressure on anybody to actually buy the product.
Mm-hmm.
And what it ended up being was that people started to know me as the flow girl, and they didn't just want the product. They got used to seeing me, and they liked getting like a bi-weekly visit from me. And what I learned is that these independent businesses, they didn't even just want like a like something. It wasn't just like a product that was offering change. It was a product that also added something to their community.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so in order to I'm trying to like bring this back to your question. In order to actually facilitate the change, it took me doing an insane amount of legwork. And it took me delivering the same consistent message with a smile on my face and just having a conversation like we are right now,
Mm-hmm.
with no pressure to conform, no pressure to buy. And it took
Mm-hmm.
longer. It took a lot longer to make sales the way
Mm-hmm.
that I approached it compared to other people. But when I did finally make a sale, I had consistent customers,
Mm-hmm.
and it went like this instead of like this. And so it was really the consistency and the legwork.
Now I'll tell you what I heard for a moment, and I'll explain why I started off with that. Because, like I said, I just finished talking about action, and I find that when I've been in community work for over 30 years now, and I find that when I dive into the rhetoric first, it's very easy to get lost in it. And so I wanted to start with something very concrete. Now, that sounds like it's just simply business, and what does that have to do with this? But the correlation for me is that you changed the why, which translated into creating a relationship with the people that you were meeting with whom you were meeting, which allowed you to, yes, at the end of the day, deal with the water, but you forged relationship, right? You made it about something else and you were willing to do the work to do it. What was funny to me about what you spoke about with the smile is that when we're talking about the racism, that the institutional level of racism and dealing with isms every day, whatever ism you deal with, people can relate to having to put on that smile even when you don't want to. You know, you can relate to, I'm sure you would leave your space with that bag full of heavy waters, not really feeling happy, but having to get the job done, and not having to, not having the space to explain to the shopkeeper that, you know what, I'm kind of tired, and would you just please take the water? But there were things that you did that were slightly outside the box in order to forge a relationship, so that when you wanted to talk about the water, they were listening to you. They were willing to listen to you. And so that piece of forging the relationship is what I want to pluck out of what you were talking about. And the reason why is because forging the relationship is often what falls to the wayside. Not all the time, because we try to forge relationships all the time. I find institutions, when they try to forge relationships, they often fall because it doesn't have enough humanity in it. But forging the relationships in any collaboration or initiative that we're talking about is fundamental. Because if I feel unsafe, if I don't have trust, which, hello, survivor and thriver from trauma, trust is the first thing to go. So that's a life thing for me. If I don't have trust, I'm not talking to you. But if I've forged a relationship with you, or if someone is feeling attacked, they're not talking to me either. So if I forge a relationship with you, then that becomes a conduit for further discussion, further initiative, journeying together, which is, it sounds like what you did with Flow, is that you disrupted and you revolutionized their business because you were able to forge relationships and then discuss the possibility of change. And they trusted you enough to engage in that discussion. On that topic, Morgan, I just want to slide over to you. Thank you very much, Marika, for that. Morgan, you've been involved in youth outreach. What I love about what you've been doing is that you've been taking it to a level that, for me, in my 3 decades of work, community work and police work, is unmatched. I've never seen anybody bring the level of spiritual development to the outreach work, because very often it's a very patriarchal approach to outreach. It's a very, let me help you out of where you're going because I'm up here and I'm going to help you out. And I'm talking regardless of skin color. That's often what I see, is that people are kind of maybe frustrated, tired, not enough resources, and feeling like what I'm doing is not even counting. But I've never experienced that with you. Can you share a little bit of your insight with regards to pretty well revolutionizing this area of giving something else, putting something else in the game of community development, motivating, inspiring?
The thing that I like about my work is the program that I'm involved with, which is with the province. They encourage us to use our whatever skills that we have to bring to the job. So some of the youth workers that I work with who are on my team, some of them are sports coaches, some are involved in, other people are also involved in meditation. So I'm not the only one. I've met a few other youth workers within my own team throughout the years who are also involved in meditation. They have others who are have other types of skills along with their education. For me, when I first had the position, the first few months was challenging because I've never been good at following the actual rules of a template, of a structure, or anything like that. So I've always added my own taste to it. So even when I was in the entertainment business and I was doing comedy, I always added my twist to it. It was a hybrid of comedy but something else. So I've always created hybrids. So with the youth work, it was the same thing, because I don't have an educational background in the field that I'm in. So I had to learn from scratch, but I had a lot of course, street experiences. So I learned how to integrate what I've always been doing and passionate about, and adding that to the youth work. It's just something I just like to do. I wasn't expecting anything to come out of that. But as the years went by, I started to realize the amount of people who have been impacted in a positive way through combining those two. Because usually with the job, it's about making referrals and getting people employment and getting people all those things. But with my experience, I've been very successful in other areas before landing this role in this industry. And there was a time where I wasn't happy. Didn't matter how much success I had, and I realized to myself that it wasn't just about the success. something else had to go along with it. So my thing was, if I was able to help people find something more as they're striving for their dreams and their goals, it could add a little more richness to what they're already, to what they're, of what they're involved in, or what they're trying to attain. So for me, it was about personal happiness. How can you get to a place of personal happiness so that it doesn't matter what you're involved in, you will always be happy? And so that was always been my goal, and that's what I've always been passing on to the youth. And for the youth that have been very serious about doing the actual work, they received a lot of benefit from doing the actual work, and many of them are in the process right now. And even the ones who have been very successful in helping other people are still in the process. So it's not something I actually ever looked at. It says, oh, wow, look what I did. Other people have come to me, and whether it's colleagues or actual participants or clients that I've worked with, who actually gave testimonies about the work that has been done with them. Because I'm the type of person that I work with people individually until the job is done. I work with you until you don't need me anymore. And that's what I do. And I always tell people, even if I leave the position, I'm still there to help you. So everybody knows that. They know that's my commitment, and that's what I'm willing to do until I can't do it anymore.
Now, I'm really curious about another question for you, how this death of George Floyd has manifested in your job, in your connection with the community, with young people. How has that manifested, and how did it hit you? Now I'm getting down into it.
For me, and you spoke to me many times, and I probably come off like I don't have any emotions. Probably on some level, I probably don't. So, of course, I'm full of emotions. Actually, I probably feel more than the average person. I just know how to make sure that I'm always stable when dealing with emotions. So when the incident happened, it didn't hit me in the way how it hits the average person, because I'm used to it, because we've seen so many cases it's happened throughout the years. And for me, it was just, oh, here's another one, here's another incident, here's another situation. So because I have that mindset, because we also have to keep in mind that I trained a very, very, very long time to be able to do that. So this has been 17 years I've been working on learning how to deal with emotions, because there was a time period where I couldn't deal with emotions very well. For those who know me long enough, knows that I have a history of having a very, very bad temper. So people who know me through my younger years knows this about me. So that is something that I had to get over. And for people who know me now, if I mention anything about having an anger issue, they'd be shocked. I was like, you, anger issues? Yeah, you always look serious, but I don't see you with anger issues. It's because I worked through those things. So when the whole case happened, good thing about that is, because I'm able to stay stable, I'm able to help other people through that. So yes, it has a negative impact on me as this stuff is going on, but the people who are really devastated by what's been going on and how they're having a hard time with dealing, that's where I step in. So of course, working in the community, we were having conversations. Even just before doing this event right here, I was just on the call with one of my older participants who started out with me, I think it was 12 years ago. And he had to let out some of his anger, and we spoke for an hour. I had to let him go only because I had to come here. But we spoke for an hour because he just needed someone to talk to, because he says all the people around him don't look like him. And when he tries to have the conversation with them, they don't relate, or they act like they care, but they really don't relate. They don't know what's going on. And the ones that do care are in shock of what's happening right now. But for them, to them, it's something new. Where for him, being a person of color, this is something that he's always been dealing with for, how old is he now? He's probably 30 now, that he's been dealing with for the last 30 years of his life. So that's what I'm dealing with. I'm talking to people one-on-one. We're holding group discussions. Yesterday, we had a group discussion through Zoom as well, holding a discussion on this very same subject matter, and just hearing what the high school kids are saying about how they have been negatively affected by this situation. So the conversations are happening, and that's what we've been doing.
And what I love about how you respond, I've seen you, I've witnessed you, I've heard you, and even now I see a question that was asked and that you answered it, is that you're very authentic, that you don't claim to know the answer, even though we each have a key and an answer inside of us that's very unique to each of us. You share and you reflect so profoundly that, that you build that trust that I feel Marco was also speaking about in the business sense. You build it in the community sense of interacting on a very real level. And what I'm going to do is actually read the question, because I believe that it's something that, again, like I said, people will relate to. So
Well, hold up a second. This question came from you, the one that I answered?
that question came from me, but there's also.
You tricked me. Okay.
Okay, no. I asked the question, but there are also a couple of written statements and questions that I want to read out to show that people are of the same, minded in the same space. I appreciate this space. I feel like I'm screaming in my head with all the devastation going on in the world right now. I would love to leave this space with advisement of what to do, how to contribute to a solution. It's all overwhelming. And like Morgan, in answering that, I appreciate your candor. I appreciate the vulnerability that you're allowing in this space. And I appreciate, Morgan, that you addressed that question as well. We'll get to some of your answers, because I know that was a private answer. I'll invite you to actually go back to that a little later on, what you would recommend for people who are feeling that way, just feeling like there's some kind of elephant stuck right here and you can't get anything past it. It's just like when you want to cry and you don't, and you feel like there's this big lump right here and it hurts. It's so big. There's another comment, kind of statement, not understanding. Black people are being killed senselessly. We have lost family to COVID, and I'm so sorry. Afraid to join protests due to health issues, but understand the value of them. How can I contribute? Now we have our kids participating and intending to participate. And I'm dealing with, as a parent, that same question, because normally I'd say, yes, do it. But I find myself instead saying, where is it? And how many people? And where are you going to be? And do you have for the protective gear? And, lots of questions. Does anyone on the floor, any of the speakers, have anything in response to that? It's a tough one.
I guess, I feel for the person who wrote that question and comment, because for those of us who have family members, we all relate in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through a protest or whatever. But the fact that we're all feeling extremely vulnerable physically, emotionally, psychologically, I think this is something really critical that we're all dealing with in one way, shape, or form. So, for instance, last night, somebody that you and I know, Terry Singh, I spoke with Terry in Toronto. I'm out here in Vancouver, and his daughter, who's in university, had been one of the leaders in a protest out in the Burlington area, I think. And she had just come home and she was sitting with him at midnight talking about it. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what did this kid do to, as you say, protective garments? That was where my thinking was, as opposed to, good for her for being out there with the megaphone and all of that stuff. So I don't have an answer, but I certainly empathize with that question and that person's feeling of the dilemma of all of this.
Let me unmute myself first. Thank you, Trevor. And I think it's really important to actually acknowledge that, because it's so easy to feel cowed from speaking that out loud, because can I really be aligned and allied with this if I am afraid to go out and expose myself, or if I want to prevent my kids, my children, from being out there? The amount of conscientiousness, the amount of awareness that we need, just highlights how things have changed. It would be just before, just pick up and go. Yeah, I'm there. Where's it happening? What time? Okay, let's get this done. Now there's so much to consider. And what I would also say to extrapolate from what Trevor said is that shame and guilt are, a couple of the many emotions that we have and that are entitled to be expressed. However, holding on to them does nobody any good. None. So the shame or guilt that we feel around anything is meant to bring our attention to the fact that something is not as we would like it to be. Whether it's in something that we're doing, that we're thinking, that we're observing. Once we recognize that, it's time to release those emotions, because then they literally turn on us and they become something else. They become pussy, they sit in our gut. They get in the way of clear thinking. They get in our way of being able to innovate and find different ways, because there may be another way to do this. And protesting in the streets, as it has been done historically, is definitely a way. However, there are other ways to address this need for change. There are other ways. However, if we are holding ourselves to the necessity of having to only be in the streets, then it makes it very challenging to find those different ways. Now, we each have ways of addressing stuff in our lives. Some people, their way is in the street, and absolutely not judging that at all. I am not judging that at all. And I think it's actually counterproductive to try to judge that either way. We can look at people and say, I've seen posts saying, what are people doing? Do they realize that COVID is out there? They're so this and they're so that. I look at that and I see the why. I understand the why very deeply. And I just know that that's the choice. It makes it tougher when it's your child. It makes it tougher when it's someone that you care about, but I still understand the why. And so because I understand the why, when I'm asked by one of our children, may I, Mom? They're all adults and still get asked. I feel very blessed that I still get asked. All I can say is that I'm stressed to high heaven, but I can't prevent you. I can't, and I won't. I won't, because of the magnitude of what's happening. I have a question or a comment here. I have two. Okay, so I'll read one that says, Mr. Young, I read The Shack and found it difficult to get through the father healing from the loss of a child in that manner. I found the book positive to healing, same level of healing we will have to deal with the deaths of so many, racially or otherwise. Paul, would you like to say anything to that?
One is Mr. Young's my dad. So.
Duly noted. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. When I wrote that book, I picked the greatest loss I think a human being can experience, and the therapeutic community comes alongside that, and same with sociology, and that is the loss between a parent and a child. And I wanted to go after that, and I wrote it for my kids. You have to understand that I never, like I said, never intended it to be out there in the world, and I wanted to address some of the deepest questions that we have about grief and loss, and it's a tough read. I was actually speaking in outside of Toronto, and I didn't realize that I had been sort of set up in this particular gathering, and I was supposed to speak, and then there was a panel discussion, and the moderator of the panel is a seminary professor, and I go into every conversation really quite naive. I just think that every conversation is a two-way street. That even if I'm talking, I need to listen to what I'm saying, because sometimes I really need to listen and hear it, right? And so I love Q&R, questions and response times, because it allows that dynamic for conversation to happen. And so I didn't know until later that he was coming after me, right? And so, but I got to speak first. And when I speak, and Kata knows this, I never plan what I'm going to talk about. I'm a storyteller, and it just starts to unravel and unwind, and it goes in whatever directions. And that particular night, when I spoke before the panel convened, I went deep into some of my own losses, some of the trauma issues, some of the baggage that I carried, some of the ways that I then became a perpetrator as a result of being abused, and all of that kind of stuff, you know. Very emotional that night. And really into the subject of grief, which is what so many of us are dealing with. It's grief, you know, and it comes out in so many different ways. And I think what's happened both with the pandemic, but specifically with situations like George Floyd, is that it tore the scab or tore the covering off with something that has been there the whole time. It didn't create a problem. It's exposed it. And the unexposed is the unhealed. And so I see that as a silver lining in the middle of all this. So I talked, and then I sat down for the panel, and the gentleman leans over and he says to me this really cryptic thing that I didn't understand in the moment. He leaned over and he said, "I came tonight to come after you, and I have nothing left." And during the conversation, he did come after me a little bit. One of his, and this refers to the question that was asked in a sense, and that was one of his problems with the shack was that the process of dealing with the grief was too quick. And he raised that as and he raised it kindly. He didn't raise it as an attack. And I'm thinking, and I'm overwhelmed with a sense of compassion for him. And I don't even know his story, right? It's just in the moment. And I said to him, you know, what I tried to do is condense an 11-year process that I experienced into a weekend, you know, because I didn't want to write War and Peace for my kids, you know. And so I condensed it into a weekend. And I said, you're right. It doesn't happen this fast. And if I'd have been able to find a way creatively to mark that process, it probably would have been a better book. And later, when we're all done, he had like 6 grown children in their 20s and early 30s. And they come up to me afterwards and they're bawling. I mean, they're weeping. And I'm going like, what's going on? And they said, thank you for being so gentle with our dad. We lost our mom less than a year ago, and he's absolutely been buried inside of the grief. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. So a couple things. One is, this is an opportunity to hear the story. And when you hear the story, suddenly you identify with the humanity of what's going on. And a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the fury, and fury is legitimate when there is wrongs, and there are plenty of those. But a lot of that doesn't allow for what does happen in terms of face-to-face relationship. This goes back to what you're saying about Marika and what she was saying. And it's inside of story that we build the sense of our unity and community as human beings. And the shack was rough for a bunch of people because of their own grief and their own losses, and it tore the scab off of some of that. But I know like thousands of interactions where, because it tore the scab off, it allowed for then movement that just didn't hide the trauma and the loss, but allowed them to begin to walk through it. So, and again, relating to that story, that's exactly what had happened that night. And I didn't know until I was offered the story. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
You know, the walking through is so key, and seeing the humanity, because we do that collectively. I see humanity as over 7.5 billion different fingers on one hand, that we're all truly connected. And when we look at our hand, we have different fingerprints on each finger, but that does not make one finger less than or more than another. They're just different and very unique and all fundamental. And you know how fundamental each finger is because when you hurt one and you can't use it, you all of a sudden realize there are a lot of things you cannot do. If we were to expand that to 7.5 billion, it's the same thing. And even if we are somehow dissociating, which before COVID-19, were pretty good at dissociating. It was just too much stuff going on, overstimulation. If it wasn't happening in our house or in immediate community, we could just kind of say, that's too bad, and then go on. But COVID-19 has put us in a space of high sensitivity and therefore really poignant reactions and in a prime position to see the humanity. Which brings me to Masaba. One of the reasons I love this man, and yes, I say it publicly, is that he sees the humanity in people more than almost anyone I know. He sees the humanity in me and loves me with it, not in spite of it, but with it. And when I see him doing that with people who, oftentimes people will judge so harshly. I look at that and I learn from it as well. And Masaba, I'm coming to you because, I know about some of your history, in the time we've been together. And that, could be enough for anyone to say, screw humanity, screw humanity. I'm just going to protect myself because there are a lot of people out there that really just don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. So if you could speak to that a little bit, the art of seeing the humanity to be able to engage, create relationship, be able to communicate.
Oof, that's yeah. That's it's as Paul was saying. It's things that happen. The healing and the process and moving forward is not a quick thing. It takes over a long period of time. Just to go briefly as to what it was when I was 18 years old. I was shot, and there was multiple occasions where guns were put on me, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that, in fact, I shouldn't be here today, but there was something else out there that was looking after me, and it took a long time. If this what had happened in the last few days had happened, say 20 years ago, I would have had a much different reaction to the current events. And it took me a long time, and I promised myself that I would not. Going down the negativity hole takes a lot of energy and a lot out of you. And I found myself going down that path, and I thought, no, I can't do this. I have to look at positive. I have to release it. I have to let it go. And I think for the most part that I have been able to do that. And then you start, and once you do that, then you can start listening to other people and seeing what they have to offer. And the other day I was asked a question, and I was honored that someone thought to ask me that question, and it was a difficult question to me. It was basically along the lines, when we talk about racism, there's multiple aspects to it. It's not just something simple painted in black and white, that this is it and this is your response, and no, it's not quite. In the question that I was asked had to do with birace, and within there's a slightly different context, because and depending upon what it is, because then you're part of both worlds, and how do you go forward and do things, and that was, it took me a while to process and try and understand it. And I think we've talked about this in a couple of other B.Y.S seminars, where you have to stop for a second and think of yourself first, because you cannot help or talk to anyone if you have that raw anger or stuff inside you. You know, what Morgan, you were saying earlier. You have to come to terms with it yourself, heal yourself, and then you can help other people. And sometimes all it takes is just to listen. Listen to what they have, because a lot of times they have the answers themselves, but they just need to let it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Saba. And the truth of that is very clear. You know, our method of teaching has grown or been predicated on this kind of, I've got the knowledge and I will share it with you. I'll teach you, I'll show you, which has its merit. What I am enjoying seeing happening now is that it's recognized that every single person is connected to the same knowledge and has access, but we obstruct it. We obstruct it with emotions that we're holding on to. We obstruct it with filters that are created out of our life experiences that we have not released, lessons that have not yet been learned, and our view is obstructed. But what we act as for each other are reflections. We are reflections to each other. And I can't see anything outside of myself if my eyes are blocked by, you know, like has been referred to by Morgan, actually, you know, Masaba, everybody. If I am blinded by fear, if I am blinded by rage, I believe those emotions are valid. Just like Paul has said, all of our emotions, they're literally crumbs. They're crumbs for us to find our way back home to peace. And they're all valid. But if we try to hold on to them, they become like irate children. If anyone out there has had a child that is not being paid attention to and wants your attention, mommy, 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 or daddy, 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 right? It's incessant. And that's what happens with emotions that have been not allowed, that have not been expressed. And that's why this space is created for that, is to express it. And then, like you said, Masaba, act as a mirror for each other so we can learn, listen, be inspired. I have a question that's kind of connected with your talk of different worlds, Masaba, coming together. There are a couple here. And Paul, thank you. You addressed it. I'll also speak it out loud. Having a lot of white friends reach out to me, many degrees of vulnerability, from just, I'm here to support, to talking about nothing but obviously scared to talk about the issues, to asking me for advice. My response right now is to not respond, as I feel like I'm being asked to care for or give them relief right now. Paul, do I have your permission to read your response, or would you like? Okay. So, hey, Renee, thank you. Even though you should not have to bear the burden to care for your white friends, because you care for them, you will. Thank you. The grace will be yours, and you will find gifts hidden in those sometimes difficult conversations. Overall, not your task, not your job, but it is an invitation. Hugs. Paul. Thank you, Paul, for that response. And if I may add to that as well, that it kind of goes back to that mask that we talk about on the airplane. You know, we always thought before we were taught that that mask needs to go on your child first. You got to save your child if you have a child beside you in the plane, someone you care about in the plane, goes on them first. And then we learned that you put the mask on yourself so that you have the ability to save your child or that person you care about. Because how are you going to help them if you're dead? So when it comes to this invitation, if you recognize that there is an inability or being stretched to a point where you're not feeling helped or helpful, you're feeling sucked upon, then it's time to pull inside for a minute find your stillness, find your strength, tap in. Because when we tap in, that's immeasurable. There is no, it's so expansive. Whether you're talking about the universe, God, I'm actually not too concerned with what your name is, but for that immeasurable, intangible source that is not possible to be exhausted. When you're able to tap into that, you become more helpful to yourself and you become more helpful to others. So sometimes taking a moment to recognize that and then responding to that invitation is helpful, because sometimes if we don't take a moment to check ourselves, what we end up doing is not necessarily being helpful. We end up reacting because that person may represent something that is very old within us, a pain body that's not been addressed, an unresolved issue. That person becomes the scapegoat, much like George Floyd did. Because I guarantee you, that officer that wasn't seeing George Floyd was seeing something else, which made him unable to see the human and the humanity and just see whatever demons he was dealing with. Nathabo, I see you nodding. I'd like to hand it over to you to address that a little bit.
Right. You know, what I wanted to say, Keda, was when I came to find out, when I came to watch the video of his death, I was so devastated. I was really sad. And but for me, it was a reminder that racism has always been there, and it is embedded in the system. But the difference now is that it's being filmed on camera. And then yesterday I was on Twitter. I stumbled on a video of his teacher when he was in grade 2. And that's what really gave me hope. This is just to add on to the fact that you were saying that he's being used as a scapegoat, you know. And so in that video, the teacher was communicating that there's a project of his when he was in grade 2. And he was supposed to communicate what his dreams were for the future. And he said he wanted to be a supreme judge. Mm. And in his words, he said, I want to be the one that makes everybody to sit down and be quiet. Now, this is the mind of an 8-year-old that articulated that. And as divine intelligence would have it, the teacher still had access to that document. She actually saved all of them. I'll send you the video after, Keda, for you to watch it.
Yes.
And for me, as I was watching it, that gave me so much hope, but brought me to a place of recognizing that though we're in pain, though there's so many questions at the back of our mind, there's a supreme divine plan, even in this chaotic moment. Mm. That may be really what's happening now is shaking systems, justice systems all over the world. I mean, we've seen these cases of Black people dying due to racism, but nobody has shaken systems in the way that George Floyd has. I mean, people are protesting in Canada, in the UK, in the US, even in Germany, all over the world, really. But I thought to myself, maybe that is his divine mandate. Mm. That is his role. That is how he was, that's the piece of the puzzle that he was meant to play right now at such a time as this. And the irony about all of this is that it is happening during the COVID crisis, you know, where everybody is being forced to look within themselves, you know, and to also pay attention to the systems as well, how things have been running and all over the world. So for me, it was a moment of pause, a moment of saying, I am hurt, I'm in pain, but I do recognize the divinity in this as well. But I do recognize that there's so many things that are being revealed at such a time as this. Mm-hmm. And it's no coincidence again that Trump is in a political position, of course, mm-hmm. which I believe is here as well to disrupt the system, to disrupt mm-hmm. culture, to shift culture forward in a positive way. Mm-hmm. He was just, I believe that he was positioned there to just bring light to the world that we're living in now. the only way we can address certain things is when we know the truth, right?
Mhm.
And the truth is racism exists. But then now, right after, what do we do?
Yes.
For me, so I do recognize that there's a supreme divine plan that is unfolding, and it's for us to be present, to observe, to do the needful, of course, protest, which is what everybody else is, what a lot of people are doing. And one of the things that I've learned over time as well is that it is through beingness that we're able to inspire change in our individual community, in our families, but also in our communities and to the world at large. So it was a reminder for me to be love, to show love to all humankind, black or white, green or yellow.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what this moment did for me. And it is my hope that as we mourn his loss, as we confront these issues that the world is facing, particularly the US, we recognize that it is our individual purpose to show up, you know, as light, as vessels of light, as messengers of light, and be love and extend grace and kindness, you know, because at the root of it all, we do know that that policeman was going through something, you know, and to also look at him through the lens of that he doesn't know any better, you know. That's his truth, unfortunately. And there's a reason why he's the way he is. For me, that's how I look at it, you know.
Love
But
the fact that you shared
ultimately,
that.
yeah, and ultimately, we're all going to heal individually and collectively, and we're going to grow and evolve through this.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Nathabo. Um, I love what you said about showing up,
Mm,
because I feel like that's such a key piece, you know,
mm,
and that we all show up differently. I think when things go awry, it's often because we're trying to show up like somebody else.
mm,
And when we're talking post trauma, that's, you know, whatever trauma we're talking about, that often happens. You know, we got our masks, we got our attempts to show up as somebody else because we don't feel safe being
mm,
vulnerable. And, you know, feeling in danger while invulnerable is a really key element to all of this. That's why
mm,
people are crying out. You know, I used to, and still every once in a while, joke that, you know, your glass begins empty at the beginning of the day when you're leaving your sanctuary. Depends on how your sanctuary is set up. And then as a person who walks out of one's home, you get these droplets of different racism or
mm,
sexism, you know, all these different little things that happen. And it fills your glass. And then there's a time that may come once a year. I have no idea how often it may happen. Your glass is full. And those days I don't leave my house. I just stay in my house because my glass is full. But it doesn't happen as often as it used to, because there will be times when maybe I've seen a movie, I've experienced something at work, or I experienced something in my intimate circles that filled my glass so much that I knew another drop would not be a good scene. So I kept myself home. And, you know, nowadays, like Morgan has spoken about, like Masaba has spoken about, like everyone has spoken about, I react differently to it. I react differently to it because I focused on me. And it sounds selfish because we're socialized to think that humility does not allow for that. But true humility is not really self-denigration or anything like that. True humility is just understanding that we're vessels, we're conduits for something so much greater. And that when we, not greater as in so expansive, we're very finite in this body, in our, you know, physiology of this beingness, that when we recognize the greater aspect of who we are, that allows us the capacity and the fortitude to talk and do what we thought we had no capacity to deal with. And, you know, I'm going to skip away from that for a minute because one, I have something from the floor and I have a hand raised in the audience. If you would put your questions in Q&A, I'll be sure to get to it there. I want to say one thing before I get to the questions. Your comment about the teacher brought to my mind the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment by Jane Elliott. Is anyone not familiar with that? Okay, So Jane Elliott, when Martin Luther King, yeah, it was assassinated, she took her children in her classroom and she put them through an exercise. And very concisely, what she did is she made the blue-eyed children feel like they were better than the brown-eyed children. She told them it would be an exercise. And by the end of it, the blue eyes were treating the brown-eyed kids like crap. And then she flipped it and told the brown-eyed kids, you are better than the blue-eyed kids. And even though they knew it was like an experiment, they had just gone through the experiment, they swiftly did the same thing to the blue-eyed kids, even though they remembered very freshly how badly they felt not being able to drink from the fountain or do certain things because the rules. So these people that were followed for years afterwards, these children, they had an intimate, not precise, but very intimate understanding of what it was like to be denigrated based on something as superficial as an eye color. That's the closest that one can get, I would think, from my standpoint, to understanding on an emotional level, because that's where it hooks, in the emotions, how it feels to be treated differently on based on something so superficial. There are many other examples where we could understand and relate to that and empathize. It's up to us each to understand and strive to get that understanding and empathy. But the reason why I brought up that that example is because it was called up to my mind based on what you said, Nathabo. And I feel like people who are able to think outside the box like that are able to really inspire change, inspire insight, create relationship, because it's being done in a way that is different. Now, I just got a beep. Are we way past our time? Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me read these. Time is going by so quickly. Okay, I'm gonna read these. Feel like we have been at this crossroad so many times. The truth has been thrown and known by many of us everywhere. We are followed around in a store, pulled over by the police, fighting for our kids to get through school with biased teachers, told that we are inferior through a smile. Did anyone want, for 1 minute, please, I'll just hold you to a minute just to address that. I saw Morgan nodding.
You know what they say in regards to action speaks louder than words? It's it right there. Many times we've gone through a situation like that where a message is passed to us through a form of gesture, through facial expression. And as soon as when I read that, that last line, I said to myself, I can relate to that. There's many times where you receive a smile and the message is, you are inferior to me.
Yeah. Particularly in Canada as compared to the States has a more overt, reality around racism. It's very, out there. Canada tends to be often, it doesn't exist here yet. It's very systemic and very prominent, and through a smile. So that's something that many can relate to. A quick story. Our son submitted a paper that was an excellent paper. Both his father and I watched over him as he created it. And the teacher did the whole, this is fantastic. Do you know what plagiarism is? So my son came home and was so proud of the accolades the teacher had given him, and then asked me, Mom, what's plagiarism? And I explained to him the significance of that question in the shadow, but really not in the shadow of the accolades. The accolades were actually in the shadow of that question. That teacher went so far as to confer with other teachers and come back to our son and say, I've spoken with other teachers and they, we agree. We just want to make sure that you didn't maybe get that off the internet. So it kept going for a week or two until I actually conferred with the teacher myself and let her know what damage she was doing. So that's with kids. And that's one of the reasons why I admire Trevor so greatly, because the work that you did in the educational field really worked to change a lot of that in the educational system. I wonder if you would speak briefly on that, just, for a minute, that very real emotional response.
Yeah, it pains me when I hear stories like that because, you know, coming out of the teaching profession, um, I know that 99.9% of those teachers are so dedicated to the children, and it just takes that little situation like that to paint that brush, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this is rampant through the system.
Mm.
I also want to acknowledge what Morgan was saying about that. Just, you know, that one look. That's all it takes, and we can pick it up. And I remember as a young teacher many years ago in the 70s, approaching another teacher and saying to that teacher, we need to do something to address the fact that the black kids in this school, and they were in a minority, but these black children were feeling not only distanced, but that they did not belong. And the teacher looked at me and she said, you come from South Africa where there was apartheid, and now you want to have apartheid again by having these children addressed separately and supported separately? And I said, no, it's just that there is a specific need that needs to be addressed right now. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that teachers need to constantly be trained and to be sensitized to what these issues are, especially issues pertaining to children of color, children who are marginalized, and so on. And that needs to be ongoing. As recent as 2011, I was teaching at W.I.S.E in Toronto. I was teaching in the Faculty of Education there. I was shocked that those young people who were coming into the faculty were, a lot of them were so insensitive to the needs of Indigenous children in the schools, and I dare say minority children in our schools. So I guess what I'm saying is that this is not going away. We've got to address this on the ground, but we also have to address it through policy and through the implementation of policy. And this is ongoing. So here out in British Columbia, when this business happened with George Floyd, and I heard the Minister of Education in British Columbia saying, well, maybe or something to the effect that we will work with the Black History Society in British Columbia to do some curriculum. I was shocked because he was only seeing a tiny little aspect of what I feel is such a huge picture right now that has to be addressed. So all of that to say that, you know, those little incidents that we see every day, and you pile them on and pile them on, there's a huge picture that all of us in all different ways have to come at this. Mm-hmm. And Kata, you were saying earlier that it doesn't matter what we do, whether it be in acting or business or whatever, we all have our parts to play. But, you know, as far as children are concerned today, that's where I feel it has to be addressed. And I just want to finish off with one thing. These children all across the world, if you will, but in Canada, have been locked away for the last couple of months in their homes, conditions that we don't know about necessarily, some very safe, but others very unsafe. And now our teachers are going back to school to basically start a new normal to teach children. And it is my hope as a retired educator that the school systems really, and teachers on the ground, don't worry too much about all those academics, worry about the way those kids are interacting with each other, socializing with each other, connecting with each other.
Thank you so much, Trevor. It's noted in the poll, a question with regards to how we're speaking to our kids. Please, I know most of you have filled in the polls, which are great. Just please continue filling those out, because not only is it helpful for you and us, but for each other. When we condense all of this and distill it, you'll possibly see things, tactics, methods, ideas that you hadn't considered. When it comes to our educational system, especially, I love that you ended on that, Trevor, that we're focusing on real life, because there's so much. There is so much. This is an opportunity, silver lining has been mentioned before, for us to co-create something different, something different. And that's why it's so important to me that we talk about those ideas, that we capture them, because whereas they seemed impossible, now there's this space that's been created through COVID-19 that industries are seeking. And Marika, you know this, they're seeking different ways and ideas to do things that we can no longer do the way we did before. It's an opportunity. So when it comes to, and I'll get to these next questions as well, when it comes to putting your ideas in, whether it's in this space or somewhere, we need to capture it. We need to connect all the different silos, because many of the different suggestions that are in the polls, the stuff that we've talked about, they exist. People are doing them at grassroots level. What's happening is people are independent of each other. Groups are doing the same thing in different spaces. And this online existence that we have is an opportunity for us to actually collaborate and combine and co-create. And that's where the momentum is built. It really doesn't matter that it began over there and we want to do it over here. The online presence allows us to connect over there and over here. That's how we're going to get some change. I have someone here who says, I have a Black partner and a mixed race child. I'm white. I recently saw a post from my sister on FB that was pretty much racist. Hurt and appalled, I felt a need to respond and call him out. I did, but he is family. What is my daughter facing from her own aunt? So her out. Call her out. Okay, so my eyes are now being opened to my partner's experience. He's beginning to share more with me what he experiences every day. My heart is breaking. I want to do something. Did anyone have anything just to lend to that? Thank you so much for expressing that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's always a difficult situation when you have family and stuff, but there's always a reason someone lashes out. And I would say to her that you need to listen and learn. I know I might be a little controversial when I say this, but there are some aspects saying that racism comes from people who are in power. So not from the oppressed, but from the oppressor.
Mm.
So I would be not, I wouldn't throw the word out racism just like that. I would call it lashing out to situations that are happening. So I would say learn, listen, and then empathize. That would do that. That's what I would say.
Yeah, empathy can be one of those very tricky. I'm just hearing some tapping on a mic, so I'm wondering, I don't know, Masaba, if you hear that? Do you hear?
Nothaba. It's
Masaba? Okay.
Oh,
your
sorry.
mic.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I wasn't able to isolate it, and I didn't want to just mute everybody, so I'll leave it like that. Thank you so much. So the empathy can be really tough. We talk about forgiveness, and we think that that's an outside job when really it's an inside job. Oftentimes when we are forgiving someone, we're actually forgiving something within us that is reflected in that person's behavior or in that person. And that can be really tough when we see some pretty crappy stuff. It's like, that does not exist in me. And it's not as literal as that. But like I mentioned, as a thriver from sexual, physical, racial trauma, I have plenty of excuses to hate a lot of people. Trust me, I can pull anything out of my repertoire and say I'm justified, right? Like Masaba mentioned, that sucks an energy that I don't have it. I don't have it because you can't tap into the immeasurable and the expansive when you're sitting immersed in that gucky emotional stuff. It can't happen. The emotional gucky stuff actually obstructs our ability to tap in. And so when we can release, acknowledge the emotion, acknowledge the validity of the emotion, acknowledge that what that person who's supposed to be in my inner sanctum just did and said about someone that I love, or some group that someone that I love represents, to me, that emotion needs to be acknowledged, the validity of it. Because under anger, anger isn't ever the core emotion. Under the anger is hurt. Under that emotion of anger, maybe the feeling of betrayal, that someone that you care about could somehow hate someone else that you care about. How do you deal with that? How conflicting is that, to grow up with someone that you love and then love someone else and feel that they could not get along? It's a very tough situation to be in. And so going inside to find the empathy that Masaba spoke about is an inside job. And then you get to look back outside to the world and not be so charged about it. I hear the word nigger or N-word still to this day. I can't tell you how differently it affects me from when I was a child. When I was a child, I had a white woman in a bathroom in like Eaton's or something come and ask me if I still lived in trees. I was like 8. And so these things, they sit on you, they create filters. Back then, I had a very, very big reaction to racism and the N-word and everything that's happening. And like Morgan, I've gone through a lot of self-work in order to release a lot of the charge. It doesn't mean that the emotion doesn't still happen. My way of addressing it has changed. My ability to forgive aspects of me that perhaps judged myself, didn't feel confident or feel myself worthy because of my race or my gender. I dealt with that myself, so that when I hear that word, when I see somebody who's trying to denigrate me or put me down, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time my response is, it's interesting that you feel that you're in a position that I care about your perception of my value. And sometimes I do get a kind of, I feel sad for you because I can see through what they're trying to do in their anger and their hate. And I see a very small, scared person. I don't know how to describe it, but I see something very small and very sad, and it makes me sadder. But my life keeps going, and I understand that my success is not predicated on that person, and I'm grateful for that. When there are people within my space that I feel are danger to me, danger to those I love, I remove them from my space. They're not allowed in the inner sanctums. They move out to the outer circles. And if they're really dangerous, they don't even make it into my circles. And that's a power that, you know, if we recognize that, it becomes empowering. It can be challenging because we think, well, what about work? I can't do that to my boss. I got to see my boss every day. Or, you know, what if it's my parent, my sibling? How do I do that? The first step is internal. It's an inside job. And then it shows us the way to do that for the external world. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's a choice. We really have to be cut and dry about it, but there's always choice. The next point, not a question, but Oprah did a large-scale version of this example at her show with her audience. It's a really interesting episode. Thank you. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. I'm actually hoping that everybody does this. If we all created spaces, and I have a huge degree of respect for anyone that broaches topics that makes people's butt pucker and that allows for people to feel safe to express. If so many people did this, we'd have a large scale shift and transition on this planet. If we're willing to acknowledge the power of this. So thank you, Elise Marie. What happens when the mother of your children calls the police to make false statements to the police that also puts you in the system? We get no breaks. Not work, not going to work or home. Does anybody want to speak to that? I'll speak after someone takes take that comment. Okay, so maybe I'll start, and if anybody wants to speak to it. In my position as a police officer, and I am retired after approximately 27 years, I've seen people take advantage of the system. And I've witnessed, people, make up stuff in order to utilize the system as a weapon, as a tool against someone else. And of course, we've heard the stories of people, saying, hey, you know what, you're Black. I'll call the police and tell them you're Black. Yeah, so do as I say, or don't do this, or, I'm going to manipulate you because I know how slanted the system is. That's a very real thing. I acknowledge that. I don't have an answer for it. What happens when the mother of your children calls? I would say that first, there's a lot of self-care that needs to happen for you. There's a lot of information gathering that you need to do, resource gathering that you need to do, because sometimes people who are put in that position, they don't know where to turn. You feel alone. You feel like everything and everyone is against you, and that's actually not the truth. It feels very vulnerable, especially as a Black male with regards to systems. It feels very vulnerable. But what I want you to hear and what I need you to understand is that there are mechanisms and there are resources, but the only way that we can access them, that you can access them, is if you reach out and you connect with people, not only people who are engulfed or immersed in rhetoric. Rhetoric is easy. I could sit from my cozy little corner and spout rhetoric all day. I'm talking about people who are active, that are connectors, that network, that understand that there are resources that you need and maybe can connect you with them, so you can get the information that you need to navigate such a system and such a situation. It's something that, as a person that has watched George Floyd and then been subjected to a situation like that, it can be terrifying. And what I would say is that please reach out, whether it's to someone on this panel, myself, and if you don't have access to resources, allow someone to show you some resources that you can tap into. It's not easy being in such a situation, and it will not be an easy journey for situations like that. When there's a betrayal in very intimate settings, it becomes a very he said, she said situation. And it's tough for systems to navigate that, but there are resources. Did anybody else want to speak to that at all?
Okay. I think you covered that quite well.
Okay. Thanks, Masaba. Okay, so again, just reach out. You can reach out privately. Please send a message or a text. Did anyone notice the diversity among the people who you see in many of the protests? It's inspirational. It surprised me. Not everyone can understand the racism that Black people feel. Many people recognize that everyone has to contribute to the solution, regardless of race. And I appreciate that note and that comment. I believe that is because people are connecting on a very human level, and that we're allowing ourselves to perceive something greater than these constructs that, yes, we're being fed and that we're perpetuating. Did anybody want to speak to that amongst the panelists? I've been talking for a while.
All I'll add to that is that absolutely, it's not, it will be a collective approach, because everything is so ingrained within the systems. For anything to change, it has to be an effort from everyone. It's not just one group or the other group, it has to be collective.
Yeah.
So I would say to that, the internet, social media, I believe plays a huge role in that, because it allows us to it allows us to connect to people that you wouldn't be able to connect to on a local level. And now that these things are happening with these forms of technology, it's allowing us to, it's creating more of that merge, allowing us, because now, because of the internet, I'm talking to people who in countries I've never been to. And that's just because of that form of communication. So even that, if that little small thing allows you to connect to another person, no matter how small that is, it's not the same as connecting with the person directly or in person, but it is a way to get just a snippet of another person's life, and that, I believe, is also contributing to this shift that's happening now that you're seeing people of all races joining in on a fight that many may say that it's not theirs, but it is our fight. It's not just a fight of race; it's a fight of humanity, and it's great to see people from all different groups stepping in on that. I feel that because right now we are in the ethnocentric stage, and you start to see examples of us moving into the world-centric stage, and people are doing that, and because things like the internet, social media, that's causing that. Of course, there's also a lot of negative that comes with that too, but it's just like with any tool, it comes with the positive and the negative, and you can choose which side you want to use that on or for. So it's just really, really good to see all these things coming together. I look at these tools, I also look at them as spiritual tools, and because they can be used for that purpose as well. So now that we have that kind of awareness, what other ways can we use these tools for? That will push us into the area of push us further into the area of good, and to you know how we always use that term, everything is connected. Now we have the tools that shows that everything is connected, and not just in regards to energy, but also in regards to technology, through art, through music, and then the list goes on. We're connected in all sorts of ways. And it's just good to acknowledge that that's one way that's making this all happen. The people are out there. We just have to connect with them.
Absolutely. Because division and separateness is an illusion. It's an illusion we can choose to, hold on to, or we can open ourselves up to the fact that we all are so connected. And I saw, Paul, that you were nodding. Did you want to say anything?
I always want to say something, I just posted a link for everybody in the chat, and it's a half an hour montage, music, poetry, things like that, produced out of Germany. And it's fantastic to take a little bit of a break and allow yourself to hear the cry of humanity from another place outside of the North American context too, and it's confrontive but beautiful. So Paddy Kelly, who is well known in Europe, he did a montage with one of the songs is with a well-known Middle Eastern rapper. Another song he did, and there's a song that's a lot of it's in English, but there's German and Latin and Celtic as well, but it won't matter. You'll understand from what you're watching what this is. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And it's worth the time. It's so stunningly beautiful and wrenching at the same time. The other thing I wanted to mention is that somebody mentioned that racism has a lot to do with power, and it does. And it doesn't take, political or jurisdictional power or systemic power. All it takes is your sitting in the seat of judgment and self-righteous judgment over another. And, I have a bunch of friends. I won't go into how I ended up there, but I have a bunch of friends on death row in Riverbend Penitentiary, just outside of Nashville. And I've gotten to know them really well. And it's a very unique place. I mean, these guys have a woodworking shop where they created the table of reconciliation. It seats about 12 people. It sits in their library, and they have an agreement on death row. And I think there's 54 now. Some of my friends have been executed, and so they have an agreement in the unit that if any of the guys have an issue with each other, they will go sit at the table of reconciliation until it's resolved. And my friend Terry King, who's there, he's been on death row for 35 years now, since he was 18 years old. And the first time I met him, and I ended up there because I wrote this little book, The Shack, and we're sitting in this room, he and Ron, another guy who's been in there for 30 years, and And he looks over and he says, can I tell you what changed my life that was in your book? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he said, there's a scene in which the wisdom of God confronts Mackenzie. And Mackenzie is a WASP. He's me, actually. And there's a confrontation between the wisdom of God and where Mackenzie is asked to go ahead and sit in the seat of judgment. And he's like, well, I'm not a judge. She goes like, you've been judging your whole life. Are you kidding? And he is confronted with that. And Terry says to me, I'm reading that chapter. He said, I've never not admitted what I did. I was under the influence. I was high and I shot a young man and he was in the military and I got the death penalty. And he said, I've never not admitted it. But when I'm reading that chapter, I suddenly realized that 30 some years after all this, I admitted it, but I never owned it. And the reason that I didn't own it, he said, was because I still sat in the seat of judgment. At least I was better than the pedophiles on death row. Mm. And he said, because I sat in the seat of judgment, I didn't have to deal with my own heart because I was better than somebody. Mm. And he said, the conviction was so powerful. I felt like my skin and my clothes were burning off and I'm literally crawling on the floor of my cell trying to figure out how to get out of my own skin. He said it changed my life. And I know it did. I know Terry contacts people outside the penitentiary now to see if there's anybody who will come and visit the pedophiles because some of them have never had a visitor in decades. And again, there's certain confluences, rivers that merge inside that story. And one is, we've got to look at our own heart because the solution is not for us to find a systemic position of judgment in order to advocate some form of coercion or violence as a response. This has got to be a response of love that loves ourselves well enough to deal with the judgment that's in our own hearts. Yeah. And you know, and Terry says, he says, I suddenly owned that I had killed somebody who was precious, who was made in the image of God. And he said, it completely broke me. And and so that's a question in the middle of all this. And I think that's what a lot of us are trying to deal with. I think especially the white community who have been inside. I mean, this is the air they've breathed. And what this has exposed is that this is the air you breathe. You didn't even know it for the most part. You just participated in it, right? And so a lot of my friends were scrambling like, okay, and it's like, all right, I've got to deal with this inside my own heart and have that exposed. And it's being exposed a lot of times inside of relationships with people of color, my African-American friends, but my First Nations friends who don't even get a hearing in this whole conversation, which breaks my heart. And it's just like, and then I've got a son, white cop, you know, who's down on the front lines, whose buddy next to him gets, well, one next to him and then one 4 down, one, the throwing of shattered glass, and the other one, you know, they're shooting fireworks right at the police officers and all this. And these are not the protesters, right? These are some faction that believes that anarchy will allow the birth of a new world and culture that is more to their benefit. And or they're just piggybacking their own fury onto a social cause that happens to be available in order to create chaos. And the protesters have done a fantastic job of even self-policing. And I acknowledge all that, but I'm also like, this is my little boy, you know, and he's a good man. And he's a father too. And it doesn't justify racism, and it doesn't justify things that are wrong and broken. It doesn't justify what was done to Floyd. It doesn't justify any of that, but it's part of the human conversation. And but again, I want to start with the judgment that's in my own heart and deal with that, and then allow that to be a place from which I can then respond to whoever is in front of me out of a fullness of my own heart, and not a, the system has to be dealt with, fine, but we've created them since the beginning of time, and they've been embedded with good and evil. That's just, it's what we do. But the question is, how do I be in this world of systems and not of this world of systems? And a lot of you have spoken to that. It's like, do the work, right? Do the work, and you're worth the work. And so is the person who's in front of you. Off my soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. No soapbox. That was all heart. And, the being able to see each other only happens when we allow that kind of vulnerability. When we could be, I see, amen, Brother Paul, amen. There's something profound that happens when we allow our truth to speak like that. When we just open up and allow our introspection to be almost public. It's very painful. It's like walking through fire. And that example that you gave of Terry King, of the skin burning off, that's not something that we're socialized to want to walk towards. We run away from that at all costs. And it often costs us our life. It costs us our ability to walk in integrity and in the light. And so if we were able to look inside of us to see what it is that we're truly reacting to, and then look outwards, because there's plenty to react to out in the world, I feel that we'd have a capacity to do all of this over and over again and build a momentum that would inevitably change our systems. Because what we're dealing with here are archaic systems. It's not an out there thing. I'm not talking about the man. I'm not talking about something out there that's, because I stopped looking at being kept down or feeling kept down a long time ago. And I worked in a paramilitaristic organization, for goodness sake. I stopped perceiving other people as having control over me. And the minute that I did that, my life changed. It changed in a way that I can't even use words to describe. Didn't become perfect. Didn't mean I didn't feel pain. But I was able to see past people's attempts, people's issues that they were trying to project on me. And I was able to see them. Being able to look at a pedophile and using a term as opposed to the human being that's being termed as a pedophile. For me, as a person that grew up being sexually assaulted for most of my childhood, for me to even be able to discuss looking at a person who is a pedophile, who has behavior of a pedophile, and say that I can even see that person, no one out there can understand how huge that is except for a person who has been through that type of trauma. That's a huge thing. Many people who experience different types of trauma, severe traumas, go to their grave with that shit. No children in the okay. So our ability to see the human being behind the action is actually predicated on our ability to see and forgive ourselves, the human being within us, the perfectly imperfect being within us. I was only able to see through to the human being that were my perpetrators for my childhood after I stopped my own self-denigration and my own raging and my own feelings of not being worthy. And that's transferable to race. It's transferable to everything. I've found that for myself. I've been able to, because I dealt with my own stuff, been able to see the human beings that were perpetrating stuff. And I've written about sacred adversaries, um, not saying that, and Paul, it's because of you that I've been able to rework this. I used to say everything happens for a reason because I grew up in Catholicism. And as I was talking to Paul one day, what is that? Fatalistic determinism, right? He pointed that out, and I went looking into that area. It's not a matter of fatalistic determinism. It's not like everything happens for a reason, and that I'm grateful to the human being that did to me what they did, the human beings that did to me what they did. When I say that I am able to look through and see the human, I'm actually saying I am looking through and seeing the spirit. Because on a spiritual level, I know that there are lessons that I have learned throughout my life that I would not give up for anything. No one could pay me to give up my lessons. I would not go and repeat any of the tough, the pain, but I would not change anything in my past. And that's a huge thing to say. I didn't come to that easily, but I really had to work to love myself. And coming to a point where I could say that I see how what people did played a role in my ability to be strong enough to love myself again is a huge, huge, huge thing. So thank you guys all. I really want to go through the questions very quickly and then give each of you about, I'm hoping a minute, I'm hoping this thing won't cut off because I did extra time, to just talk about where you're at now and give you people out there a moment to fill in the poll if you haven't already or if you haven't completed it, or add some comments into the chat. And I believe there's one more question. Oh, I have a comment here, Paul. Wow, Paul, thank you for sharing that. Well spoken. Thank you for that.
It's very kind. I appreciate the space. Thank you.
And thank you, whoever put that in there. It's very, very much appreciated. Ah, this is so amazing. So first question, is this your first time taking part? That's actually not what I want to get to. Okay, your intentions. Please pay attention to your intentions for coming today. If your intention was some kind of action, some kind of change, then you really have no excuse for not putting something in the chat or not filling in the poll, because this is part of that. Or joining into other spaces that are similar to this. It doesn't have to be this. Anything that encourage more than just us thinking in our own head and connecting with each other. What are you feeling coming into the butterfly effect? You know, for the most part, I'm seeing that people are really just kind of exhausted and frustrated, but neck and neck is also people are caring and empathetic and at a loss as to what to do. And so I'm hoping that you got something towards that, you know, not feeling quite as exhausted. I'm hoping that the synergy of energy here has been enough to help feed you a little bit. It's been helping me as much as I felt pulled emotionally with everything that's been said. I also feel fed, and I'm hoping that that can be true of people who are listening and watching. How do you address what's happening? I have a few people that say I don't, and I get it. You know, sometimes we just want to numb out. That's where, you know, addictions come from, right? All kinds of different things, different ways that we want to just move away from what's happening because we don't know. But I see a lot of different ways that people are using to address what's happening, not only for children in your life, but also for ourselves, which is really key, finding that stillness, regrounding in nature, researching and listening and learning. Morgan mentioned social media. Social media is a reflection of where we're at, just like our lives are a reflection of where we're at. So if I choose to stick to the same silos, stick to the same people, stick to the same convos, I'm not really doing true learning and true listening. And that's why I'm grateful for you guys here tonight, because this is outside of the box a bit. We've got different experiences, different people, all in the mix. And what does equity mean to you? Access is the top, access. And so in changing our systems and talking about doing something, doing something tangible. We need to understand that we have to do it together, and we can't keep catering to this illusion and construct of divisiveness. It's not real. It's not real. Our experiences are real. Adversity is real. There are lessons in them, but it's collectively that we actually surmount that we get over it, over that wall that is being made to appear when it really isn't there. We can do it together. So being seen, access, being heard, the power to choose is high up there. Opportunity is high up there. Empathy. I really appreciate the fact that a lot of people in this space are looking for ways to align and to co-create. So leave information for us to be able to contact you, and we will strive to recreate this type of space again. What I want to do is end off we have a couple of comments and a question that I'll read off, and then I'll get to the wrap-up minute for each panelist. So, Francis, seeing and hearing Paul made me feel so much better about becoming a storyteller for you. If that is what he is, then me too. Thank you, Francis. Fran, again, thank you. Great job, Kata, Paul, and all. Thank you. Thank you, Fran. Did someone mention George? George bullied? Who was that? If I heard correctly, I knew George a long time ago. Oh, so Fran knew of a George a long time ago as well. Okay, I have a comment. Thank you very much for that, Fran. I have Kenneth Daniel who says, thank you. Very tired. I have been coaching for 30 years. Our children need that village. We are working and leaving our children to raise themselves. When they fail, that's when we want to save them. And we want to offer them tools for when trauma, when challenge comes, that they have the resiliency and the understanding to know that they do have the village around them and that they're always supported and seen. So thank you for that, Kenneth. And I'd like to turn the floor over to anyone who wants to take the floor first. I'll give about 30 seconds to each person to address anything that I just mentioned, any comments, and also just to wrap up.
First, I just want to say, give a huge shout out to Kenneth Daniel. He's the person why I'm here today. He's the one who helped me get the position at Malvern Family Resource Center years ago. So I just want to say thank you, Ken. He's the guy. So it's great to see you here today. I haven't seen you in a while, Ken, so a pleasure. I just want to say, otherwise, there are so many ways that we can work on this. As I've left as I answered in the Q&A in regards to shadow work and the work that can be done. I said earlier that it's not everyone is going to do the work, but there's something I've been preaching in which it has to do with the 1%. If you get 1% of the world's population to do the work, that 1% will influence the 4%. So now you have the 5%. The 5% will make the global shift. So all you need is the 1%, and 1% of the world's population is 77 million people. 77 million people is all you need to inspire. So if we can influence that 1%, that work will get done, and that work is getting done. It just happens slowly. It happens at its own time, but it is happening. It's happening as we speak. So I would encourage everyone to become that 1%, or at least the 77 million people to be that 1% that will help make the change. To influence the 4%, that 4% will create the global shift that will move us forward into the next level of evolution.
Thank you, Morgan. See what I mean by polymathematician, right? Breaking it down to numbers, but numbers are significant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Morgan. Who would like to go up next? Oh.
What Morgan just said is the butterfly effect. I mean, here we were invited to the butterfly effect. Nobody even mentioned chaos theory. So what we're talking about is chaos theory, the chaotic presence of love in a systemic world. Yeah. So,
yeah.
And it's like, and I think Morgan would agree with this. Look at the deepest longings of your own heart and begin to express those. You know, don't get your deepest longings from social media, right? Look in your own heart. What is it that you want at the deepest places of your inner person? Authenticity, truth telling, clarity, openness, right? I mean, just kindness, all of those things. And I think then you tap into the truth of your being. And once you know and you begin to celebrate the truth of your being, the way of your being will naturally match it. Oh, so honored to be with y'all. Come on.
Thank you, Paul. Who would like to go up next? Masaba.
No, I just wanted to. I learned a lot from everyone and what they had to say, and I've learned a lot from, and so I'm very thankful that I've been on this panel to be able to participate and learn from each and every one of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Masaba. And who would like to go up next? Natabo.
Yes. Kat, I just wanted to say thank you for creating this healing space, and thank you everybody for sharing your heart. There's so much that I learned today. And to Paul, this actually was a full circle moment for me. I first encountered your book in 2017, and I was actually getting a gift for a friend who had just divorced at the time, and he found it healing. And I just wanted to say to everybody who's tuning in, we are one. Let's continue on doing our part, positively impacting the world in our community. It starts with us ultimately, but don't be afraid to be the light in the midst of the chaotic, I mean, in the midst of the chaos that is going on in the world. Yeah.
Thank you, Natabo. Marika or Trevor? Marika.
I can go. Yeah.
Okay.
Trevor, I'll leave you for the final statement. I guess I'd love to, Kate, to touch on something that you've brought up and Paul, both you mentioned. And in terms of, you know, trauma, I had a traumatic event that actually went all the way to federal court. And for me, the biggest healing was when I went in. And when I went inside, I was able to actually realize that if I decided that this person who took me to this place, if I decided that he wasn't worthy of love, then I was doing the exact same thing to him that he was doing to me. And so I really, like, I'm just so fully there with you in that sentiment that you do have to go in and do that gritty work that feels like your skin is literally falling off. But deciding that, you know, he was worthy of love too. It was the biggest healing moment for me, and really just it changed my perspective and made everything so much lighter. So and thank you, Kata, so much for bringing this together. It was so it's so beautiful to like be able to sit here with everybody, and you know, talk about it from a place as human beings. So thank you.
Thank you, Marika. Trevor? Oh, you're muted. Oh, I don't want to miss one drop. Let me see if I can unmute. Okay.
I didn't realize I could sit this long without going to the washroom. That's a compliment to you.
Thank you, Trevor.
But
I can relate. Yeah, so anyway.
I want to thank you to all the panelists and especially to you. The words that I strive to live by are from Stephen Covey, which says, seek first to understand before you can be understood. So that...
Can you say that one more time? There was a little robot.
Seek first to understand before you can be understood.
Good, yeah.
And I think I've heard that time and time through the conversations today, you know, the whole notion of empathy and and seeking to understand, that comes through all the time. Once you can understand the other person, you can make yourself better understood. And I think, that's a message as we go forward with the work that all of us are doing, that I think for me personally is what it's about, given all of the challenges that we're all facing. So Kata, thank you again for creating this wonderful space. And it's just great to be with you again. And like Marika says, thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevor. I think I saw something. Yes, thank you, Clement, for typing that for everyone. I'm going to see if I can copy that and put it out to everybody. Clement says, so powerful. Thank you, Trevor. I'm going to just shoot it out to everyone as well, for anyone that may want to copy it. And I really want to thank everyone, all of you. My heart is so full. I feel so connected with everyone. I feel like this is not it. Whether it's through another butterfly effect webinar, whether it's being in another space that someone has created, I feel like this is part of that butterfly effect, and that we're doing something really magnificent just by being together tonight and delving deeper into our own individual understanding, taking that Steve Covey quote, to understand each other, because the connectivity is such that when I understand me, I understand you better. And when I understand you better, I understand me better. Or like the mirror is like those rooms of mirrors in the circus, right? It just keeps going and going. Are we willing to look? That's the question. So thank you so much. Blessings to everyone. Be well, be informed, be safe, and be empowered. Just be true to you. I love you. Take care.